Depois de uma pandemia que deixou em terra grande parte de um setor feito para voar, que obrigou a layoff e a reduções de frotas e de pessoal, o pós-pandemia trouxe o alívio nas restrições, mas também um teste difícil a serviços debilitados e com menos pessoal, a quem era exigida a resposta imediata, próxima dos níveis de excelência praticados antes da pandemia. A juntar a esta adaptação o início de mais uma guerra, desta vez na Europa, com as catastróficas consequências humanas, sociais e económicas que se avizinham, ou aliás que já se estão a sentir, induzem todas as sociedades e indústrias fortes níveis de incertezas. A aviação não é exceção. Costuma dizer-se na área financeira que as crises trazem sempre oportunidades, mas é preciso saber reconhecê-las e, sobretudo, aproveitá-las. Numa altura em que as matérias-primas e os combustíveis encarecem, levando também ao aumento de custos de produção ou implementação de novas práticas e ao refriar de grandes investimentos, como é que a aviação pode almejar a projetos inovadores e voar por este cenário incerto? Para moderar o debate Fatores de Incerteza na Indústria, Resiliência e Adaptação, chamo ao palco José Carlos Coelho, Global Chief Financial Officer na Blue Aviation. Olá, boa tarde.
Boa tarde.
Grande desafio este debate, vou-lhe dizer só pelo nome.
Vamos ver se as pessoas não adormecem, isto é o último...
Não, ninguém vai adormecer, está toda a gente lá em casa
painel,
também. The last but not the least,
yeah.
Não é? Então pode chamar os seus interlocutores e boa conversa, está bem? Obrigada.
Queria então chamar a doutora Paula Chilão. I'm going to speak in English because we have an invitee from Ireland. This is Paula Chilão from Verlingue, an international insurance broker, and Mr. Francisco Dias from DLI Paper, aviation lawyer in Portugal. Please. John, are you with us?
Hi, José.
Hello, John. How are you? Everything okay?
I am very well, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for connecting. So, I would like to thank the organization for inviting me for this challenging debate.
Paula, não vemos ninguém.
And with this gentleman and lady, we are going to analyze all the challenges that aviation is facing since the pandemic. I would start to say that when the aviation is recovering from the pandemic, although certain areas still suffering from the global lockdown and the grounding of all fleets, between the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, the war in Ukraine appears, which gives and brought other kind of challenges. And for that, you go directly to this theme. Aviation, although those challenges, has shown a remarkable resilience and adaptation in the last 36 months. Now the question is, getting out from the pandemic of COVID-19, going to another challenge with the war, the question is how to adapt to these new challenges. And for that, I invite these three gentlemen, and I will start for Mrs. Paula Chilão, but before that, we are going to analyze this on three specific perspectives. In terms of international insurance, on the side of financing and leasing aircrafts, which we invite John Konkoly to be with us, and I would like to present a little bit more our invitees. Mrs. Paula Chilão, she is the aviation director of Verlingue. Verlingue is an international insurance broker that is recently acquired a company in Portugal. called Luso-Atlântica. They are at the moment in 5 countries, and they are the 4th insurance broker in Portugal. Mr. John Konkoly is the Vice President Marketing of Carlyle Aviation Partners. Formerly it was Apollo Aviation Group, with its headquarters in Ireland and with us remotely. And last but not least, Mr. Francisco Alves Dias is a senior aviation lawyer of a law firm called DLA Piper in Portugal, but is also an international office law with more than 40 offices all over the world. A little bit story about those companies they represent. Verlingue is a French broker, the insurance broker, of course, and is trying to make his grow not only themselves, but also by acquiring other companies. They did that in Portugal, in Switzerland, in UK. So they are expanding not only with his own growth, but also with the clients. Carlyle Aviation Partners was founded in 2002, is the 6th lessor at the moment in the world. Some numbers, yeah, they have 419 aircrafts under management. They have $11.7 billion assets under management, 3 billion euros of aircraft acquisition in 2021, 106 clients, 59 countries, and 20 years of operation. DLA Piper is, like I said, a multinational law firm with offices in 4 countries and in Portugal. It was founded in 1982, and the Portuguese office is part of DLA Piper since March 2017, if I'm not mistaken. This office lawyer has more than 60 lawyers in Lisbon, and as far as I know, they are one of the best law firms in aviation activity. So I would start with the first question. Because I'm a gentleman, I try to be a gentleman. I will start by Mrs. Paula Chilão. And my first question is, can you give a quick overview how insurance market adapt to the pandemic lockdown? I'm saying that because we all know that when aircraft is flying, it pays a certain amount to be insured. But the aircraft is on the ground, it's a totally different story. So I presume there was a significant reduction on your turnover and the turnover of the companies, of course. But can you give me an overview of this lockdown, please?
Yes, it's true. With the pandemic, the insurance market the aviation insurance market earned less money than they expected. One of the ways that, or one of the conditions that they earn money is with the passenger. I'm referring to airlines, is the transported passenger. They charge an amount, and with the reduction, with the aircraft grounded, they didn't earn. Also, they have to return. It's one of the conditions of the airline policies and the jet policies is that if the aircrafts are grounded, they also return to the clients, to the insured, they return certain amounts. So what happened, it was that the insurers, the income of the insurance companies was less. The aircrafts were grounded. The problem is that all the aircraft grounded, there were more accidents in the airports. The insurers are the same. So the the benefit that they had, or they thought that they had with less risk, it was not. It didn't happen. Another thing, it was that aircrafts during the pandemic were changed uses. A lot of the aircrafts that were made to transport passengers were converted, and they started to transport cargo. And for the insurers, there was not a benefit because they didn't earn the transported passenger. So it was not very good for the insurance market, the pandemic, and it was not a benefit that a lot of persons think. So it was not good. There was no accidents in the flight, but there was accidents on the ground. So.
Okay, thank you. John, I will pass to you now. So considering, like I was saying, these two big challenges faced recently, first COVID-19 and then Ukrainian war, how do you see and forecast the near future on the aircraft market availability, considering the twists and turns that we are facing when we talk about narrow body aircrafts and wide body aircrafts? I don't know, but maybe you explain first what's the difference between narrow and wide bodies, and then please give me your view on that.
Sure. Thank you, José. So narrow body aircraft are the twin jet aircraft, probably that we're mostly familiar with flying on short haul and domestic routes. And then the wide body aircraft are the 2 or 4 larger aircraft, the AC-30 variants or the 787s. Some people might be familiar with the 747s or the A380s as well. But that's the difference. So you're talking largely short haul segments versus the longer haul segments between the narrow and the wide bodies. So obviously COVID was hugely impactful to the aircraft leasing industry, obviously the airlines too, a lot more so than the war in Ukraine. But I suppose it's the repercussions of that war that will determine how the market fares based on the higher inflation environment and just the macroeconomic outlook. But like after COVID, we saw that the stored global fleet was about 14,000 aircraft, and it's now about 6,000 aircraft. But for comparison, the pre-COVID, it was about 2,000 aircraft. So the level rose slightly after the invasion of Ukraine, as some of the Russian fleet was grounded initially, and the Ukrainian fleet obviously, but that increase subsided. So all in all, the demand for aircraft and passenger demand has come back very strongly. And while there are certainly the macroeconomic risks out there, we're not seeing a slowdown in demand from airlines for aircraft next year. But it's largely dependent on the variants. So the narrow body market remains to be very buoyant, whereas the wide body market less so. The grounded fleet disproportionately consists of wide body aircraft, as international and in particularly international long haul travel recovery lags domestic and short haul recovery. But for the immediate future, we were looking at the booking curves that were issued by IATA for the 4th quarter. And as of the 3rd week in September, we saw October bookings about 70% of 2019 levels, slightly lower in November and about 66% in December. And these are only between 1 and 4 percentage points lower than they were in June for the summer season. So that indication would mean to us that the demand is strong going into the end of the year. Beyond the end of the year, as in going into January and the new year, the total bookings now are only 12%. Our bookings for then are only 12% of total bookings. So it's hard to believe that the economic slowdown that is looming won't dampen demand for 2023. However, it won't be felt the same way across the world. I believe IATA was expecting the Americas to reach 2019 levels in 2023, Europe to follow in 2024, and Asia largely driven by China in 2025. My own first-hand experience is that we had 19 aircraft to remarket this year, some of which were unscheduled returns, and we've already contracted 18 of them to follow-on operators, one going to an airline based in Lisbon. And for the first half of next year, we have 11 aircraft returning off lease, and already we have 6 committed. There's certainly strong demand for the narrow-body aircraft, particularly 737-800s, MAX 8s, A321s, and now for the first time, the A320neos that are rolling off their initial leases. But the wide bodies continue to remain challenging.
Okay, thank you. Now, Francisco, I have a long question for you on legal and regulatory perspective. Considering what we saw with the failure of the Chicago system regarding the coordination between member states in the certification and registration of aircraft, deriving from economic sanctions applied to Russia, and from a legal and regulatory perspective, how does the international aviation regulatory framework allow for the economic sanctions currently in place and consequences from the decisions in place?
It is a long question. Let me just start with a small anecdote on this. In 2005, I was negotiating with a lessor, not Carlyle, a dry lease of an aircraft. And I was discussing with the lessor the events of default clause if the airline goes bankrupt, repossession of the aircraft. Always a tricky subject. And I asked, why isn't there a clause saying if you default or if you go bankrupt? And they laugh and say, oh, we're banks, we don't bankrupt. This was 2 years before subprime.
Yeah.
If you asked me 2 years ago, how are we dealing with the failure of Chicago system? I would say Chicago doesn't fail. Chicago is from 1944 convention.
Yeah.
It withstands all aviation post-World War II. And it's a wonderful legal instrument. It's very specific on the technical side. That is why you fly aircraft all over the world with the same rules. But it's open enough on the economic and policy side to allow everything to happen. Now, and compared to what happened last year, Brexit was a breeze. I mean, we had the pandemic with all the problems it brought to airlines. We'll talk about that in a second. But what happened with Russia in the last year, and again, there's a lessor on the table, so he'll probably be more mad than I am at this. But what happened with Russia in the last year is paramount, and honestly, I never thought I would see it. So Russia has been able to, within 6 months period time, breach Article 17, Article 18, Article 6, 9, and probably 12 of Chicago Convention in a month time. So, and to explain what happened, the moment the EU sanctions were approved and those airlines could not fly, and Russian airlines could not fly to European airspace, most of those aircraft are registered outside Russia. An aircraft, according to Article 17, can only have one registration. And aircraft to fly need a certificate of airworthiness, as we know, and a radio station license, as we know, which is issued by the certification state, which is the same state as the registration state. It seems complicated, but it's not. Just go to one state, get it all done there. Now, the moment the sanctions applied, it became a problem for Russian airlines to operate. And what they did was, through the approval in May of law, I believe it's 411, I did not dominate Russian law, but I think it's law 411, they created a dual registration system. They created a national system completely outside the Chicago system, registered the aircraft there. I don't even know if they issue certificates of airworthiness, because they wouldn't be able to. Those aircrafts are flying without a certificate of airworthiness. And I would leave the insurance problems to Paula on that. She'll explain what it is. And if you ask, probably the opinion here from Carlyle is our aircrafts are being stolen. Russians will say we're just trying to fly them. Cannibalization of aircraft will happen, has to happen. It's a fatality, as they cannot buy any parts. Currently, if you have an aircraft from the legal side, although I get a lot of work from it, but it's drastic. It's not the kind of things we like to do. You have aircraft, we have an iron curtain. We have aircraft registered in European countries, which are physically in Russia. European CAAs cannot go and inspect the aircraft.
No.
Russian operators cannot bring the aircraft here, and they're afraid of being seized. They probably would be. And what do you do with them? I mean, you cannot cancel the registration here. You cannot operate them here. This is the problem which we're facing. It's not being fixed. Time is moving on. The aircraft are there, probably not being able to operate. And the real tragedy of this is if I was a Russian national, I would be afraid of flying on an aircraft nowadays. And this is because for the first time since 1944, we have created a parallel system to Chicago. And the sanctions themselves, we can discuss and argue if they do not breach in themselves, the EU sanctions, the right of overflight, the principles of jurisdiction, even Article 12, by not recognizing the Russian CAA. But the ripples of that stone in the water are completely paramount. It is a very specific situation. It is a very complicated scenario we are looking at. It's not one where we have clear answers to what will happen. I think time will tell, time will say. Operators are afraid, I understand, of insurance premiums going up. Mm-hmm. We know it's an elephant in the China porcelain store. It's a very small market, so premiums can easily go up. I don't know how the big lessors expect to recover the aircraft at some point. And I don't know what to do with aircraft which are registered here, but without a certificate of airworthiness now, I fear for the worst.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, this is not safe. This is a very serious situation, needs to be solved. And I mean, everybody come back to Chicago and behave, that would be the perfect solution. I don't know if it will happen. Let's see how this goes.
Okay, so it will be, in fact, a very, very big challenge how those aircrafts came out from that situation. Okay, Paula, 7 months after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, what is your view about the impact in the aviation insurance market? Mm-hmm. What will happen to the aviation insurance if, for example, a more broader war happens, namely in respect of the coverage of war and allied perils coverage?
Okay. First, with the invasion of Russia to Ukraine, the insurers have in their whole war policy and in their war policies, not only whole but also in liabilities, a clause that they can cancel cover with an effect of 7 days. So after 7 days they send an information to the insureds, and after the 7 days they are not covering all the operations in the countries. So they sent after the invasion, and nowadays it's sanctioned, so it's two excluded countries in the aviation policies. So in the European and American aviation policies, operators cannot fly to Ukraine, neither to Russia. Okay, so it's forbidden. So if they go there, it's not covered. This is a point. Another point is the future. If the problem is they have, since everything, it was the first time it was with the 9/11 that the insurance market canceled the coverage, and there was a big problem for all the states because there was, at that time, there was no liability coverage, and the states in the world covered if anything happened and thank God it doesn't. It didn't happen. Nowadays, the problem is that aircrafts that are grounded, as Francisco mentioned, in Russia, and they are not owned or leased by the Russian persons or Russian companies. The policies have a clause that can be that lessors and owners can request the amount of the hull. So it's a big problem because they were nationalized and confiscated by Russia, and they have a period, and if they cannot get or cannot take the aircrafts from there, insureds can go to the insurers and ask the amount of the hull. I know that several lessors and owners did that already, and I know also that Lloyd's, the biggest market in the world, have already put in the court some cases in order not to pay. So they are trying not to pay, but what I heard from the market that they will be obliged to pay and to give the money to the owners and to the lessors. Another point is now there is a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The problem is that if there is a war between one of the 5 big countries, and this is written in the policies, in the aviation policy, and 5 countries are United Kingdom, United States, Russia, France, and China, the policies of war will cease. So there will be no coverage. So all the aircrafts will be grounded because for now it's only a conflict between one of them, it's Russia and Ukraine, that is not in the list. Insurers had 7 days. If 2 of these 5 have a war, there is no insurance for anyone. So the insurance policy will cease. There is no coverage for any operator or lessor or owner or something. So this is the future.
Yeah, because
it's dramatic.
Just a side comment. So I would imagine that this kind of situation that is happening between Russia and Ukraine can be considered as force majeure or something like that? Because
no, at all.
Okay. Well, getting back to John, on another aspect. So today we know that there are a lot of lack of materials and metals and things like that. So there is a lot of constraints. How do you see that in manufacturing aircrafts? And how do you see if there is a need to make new leases on used aircrafts? What do you see that happening with the momentary constraints that you have in the world?
Thanks, José. And further to Paula's comment, I'm very relieved to hear that in the market, Lloyd's, the judgment against Lloyd's for the insurance payouts. I watched that closely. But going back to your question, yeah, undoubtedly the OEM, the manufacturers are experiencing huge supply chain issues, mainly at the metals, and so we're seeing delays to new aircraft deliveries. It's also delays to parts and to engines, so it also applies just to the maintenance of the existing fleet as well. I mean, most airlines I'm speaking to in Europe are seeking to grow their fleet or keep their fleet numbers the same, but that still requires replacement aircraft. So what we're seeing with in terms of the leasing is that airlines are extending their leases, or they're looking to other operators like ACMI specialists, which are the wet lessors, for additional lift in their peak seasons. The volume of the new leases for the used aircraft, they're recovering to the pre-pandemic level, particularly in Europe. I believe over the last year, we saw 60% of new leases were just in Europe alone. But from the commercial side, with regards to these delays and then what it brings to the demand, like we're not seeing the same commercial tools, I suppose, used for COVID. Like we deferred a lot of rent. We entered power by the hour agreements, which became quite standard during COVID, and then they were sort of adopted during. They were adopted at the initial outset, I suppose, of the war in Ukraine. But seeing that hasn't really made a huge impact to the demand for aircraft. Those terms are no longer the industry norm post-pandemic and in the current war environment. So we're reverting back to more standard terms, but albeit issues like insurance, and Russia now is a sanctioned country, as is Ukraine, for our leases. But other than that, it's sort of reverting back to the pre-COVID environment. Yeah, and the manufacturers, they're trying to increase supply, but they're constrained a lot. So there's been pressure on pricing of new aircraft leases recently, but with the, I think, change in the interest rate environment, the pricing will catch up, even though the supply and the delivery of the new aircraft is behind.
Okay, thank you. Francisco, back to you. We are on a topic here about resilience and adaptation. Considering that, what market trends can you expect to aircraft operators considering the new challenges facing European aviation?
Yes, let's move to something brighter.
Okay.
Nicer. New market trends.
Agreed.
It's easy and it's difficult. It's very easy what we want. It's difficult to get there. We want a safer aviation, of course. Safety is always the main principle. We want a more sustainable aviation, and we can talk more about that, what is sustainable and how to get there. We want more connections, and this is all beautiful. But the problem is we also want cheap aviation. And I think is the conundrum. How to give this to the market without sky-rising prices. And I find that to be very difficult to happen. We can expect this increase in air tariffs not to maintain. If fuel goes down, it'll probably go down, but we should not expect to go back to very, very low prices. And to the operators, I think this will accelerate a trend which already existed, which is the consolidation of European operators. Same as happened in the US. The European market is a little bit behind, but I find it very difficult for airlines to stay standing alone. We know consolidation is difficult because of ownership and control rules that many countries apply. The EU moved those away for intra-EU market, but on the external relations, they still exist. So to give a very easy example, when British Airways or IAG bought a very substantial stake on Iberia, there was a very big concern that Iberia would lose their traffic rights in several countries in South America, as the bilaterals between Spain and those countries had ownership and control rules, and the airline had to be Spanish. The practice, and in fact, as it didn't happen, because there's an underlying principle that countries want communications and people want to fly. So I would say bringing back traffic from 2019 is not a futurology. It's here. We've seen it. We will continue growing. It will take us several years to recover, if ever, the last 2 years that we have lost. But I do believe market consolidation will bring bigger airlines in Europe, providing more connectivity. Prices will continue higher than before, despite and notwithstanding the consolidation of operators. And a very important aspect, which, looking on the bright side that came out of COVID, there is a lot of very important and good work being done on the facilitation annex. So the revision of Annex 9 on facilitation is ongoing. New commissions have been created to make sure it doesn't happen again, what we had. People have to understand, what we had was people pushed the handbrake on the aviation market. Suddenly, all aircraft were grounded and people had to fill in 17 papers to fly from country A to B. And that's a facilitation problem. That's a facilitation issue. And I think on that side, things will get better. We will all have to fill up a form taking care of the medical side, but I do not believe we'll go back in the next crisis. I hope we won't have one, but if it comes, I hope countries will be more aware and conscious that what they did for aviation, I mean, was almost as bad as owning a nightclub to own an airline.
Yeah.
It's completely closed.
Probably we will face something parallel to what happened on the lessor side. As you know, AirCap merged with GICAS recently, so they are probably the biggest lessor at the moment. So there will probably be a parallel between
and
that
airlines.
and the alliance.
What are alliances? We used to say an alliance is a poor man's merger.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we'll go to the merger now.
So we have 15 minutes. So I have a last question for three of you, and I would ask you to be the more synthetic possible. So, Paula, again, what is happening in the insurance market with the more and more joint ventures and fusions of insurers and brokers? What will be in the future?
It's the same.
It's the same. Okay. Understand.
It's the same as the operators and the same as the lessors. It's the same. It's the same. The problem is that, okay, with the merge and acquire, they will have more capacity. It's good because the market is increasing, the aircraft's value is increasing, the liabilities with the number of passengers is increasing. So the market needs to offer more capacity, and with the merge we will have more capacity. With the new types of risks, they are able to bring offers to that type of risk. Nowadays, the drones, so there are new types, innovation, technologic that they can underwrite. The problem is with less underwriters, the costs of the premiums will
go up.
Increase, of course. There is no competitor, so it's what will happen. Okay, we will arrange solutions that are not available now, but the problem is that the premium will increase in the future. Yeah.
But just an additional question: do you see that happen in European countries, in the United States?
Everywhere.
Everywhere?
Everywhere.
Okay.
And with this, with the pandemic, with the conflict, nowadays the premium are increasing. In the airlines, and we will have a lot of airlines will renew their policy. The policies are for 12 months, and a lot of them renew on 1st of July and on 1st of December, and we will see on 1st of December the big impact of the increase of the premiums. I will see, yeah, certainly, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paula. John, the last question for you. How do you see in the future the lessor's activity in the coming years, compare what was been done in the past, and how do you see, for example, the operations of sale and leaseback, which is always a solution for the companies can be financed on an indirect way, because we see with this challenge and adaptation, there are a lot of airlines that will face financial difficulties, and maybe the sale and leaseback should be a good product. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I see lessors taking a larger share of the global fleet, whether this is through sale and leasebacks or their own fleets. The airlines themselves, even the traditional airlines who operated older fleets, they're replacing aircraft with younger models because they need to mitigate their cost exposure on not just maintenance but fuel burn. And the airlines that traditionally operate younger aircraft, they're still replacing their current fleet with new aircraft because they have CO2 emission targets as well. So there will be a need for to source financing for all of these. And so that's why I believe the lessor market, it's currently about 50% of the global fleet. But sale and leaseback volumes remain strong, and they have been even throughout the pandemic and going forward. And the expectation would be that the leased share of the global fleet could reach 60%. Certainly in the last 2 years, new aircraft deliveries were about 60% funded by the leasing companies. And then also with some of the COVID relief packages received by some airlines, the capex was limited going forward for a certain number of years based on the packages that they received. So the sale and leaseback market for airlines who say have a direct order book with the manufacturers is a way for them to continue with their deliveries without exceeding their caps. And you mentioned earlier the consolidation of, say, within the leasing industry, but particularly with AerCap and GCAS. We're also seeing new entrants emerged by some large institutional investors. So the financing and investor appetite is still there. But what's more at risk there, I think, is with the rising rate environment, the lease terms that were achieved by some of the airlines in the low interest rate environment on the sale and leasebacks will no longer be able to be achieved. We were seeing lease rates as low as 0.5% on some of the more desirable variants on the narrow bodies, and as low as 0.6s on the wide bodies. That's just not sustainable in this new interest rate environment anymore. So there will definitely be a correction there, but it'll be lagged. And also, of say the top 15 lessors that I can think of, most of them are trying to grow their book. They're trying to expand their own fleets. So the sale and leaseback market will be paramount in them doing that.
Okay, thank you very much. So another big challenge. Well, last but not the least, Francisco, discussing the old changes in the sector. How will the European environment agenda impact the aviation sector? What changes will occur, and how will operators adapt?
They are already occurring. Sustainability, if you look at it, it's not just environment, it's also social responsibility. It's a full package. And we see, and let's divide it. So if you look at the social perspective of it, we have had the Ryanair decisions regarding social security and applicable law to crew. We have had a uniformization under the EU of the rules of social security, where the crew has to register actively preventing flag shopping for the crews. So I think that's something that's very interesting, which is happening within the consolidation of the European market. Notice that the European market, aviation, the single market was created in 92. You have the first package in 92, but it only applied to airlines. And then we have airlines doing flag shopping for the crew, flag shopping for aircraft registration, and those things are ending, and they have to end. On the environmental side, the challenges are cumbersome. We have ETS being applied to aviation. As we know, everybody was in panic. It worked, I believe, smoothly. It helped that licenses were cheap in the beginning. They will stop being. But I think the industry has accommodated it well. We have sustainable fuels coming up. We have a lot of technical development reducing fuel consumption, which in that sense, it's good that fuel prices are high when it's pushing and forcing us to reach the 50 or 55 objectives. But on the downside, as we're doing all this at a EU level, and Corsia will come to expand ETS to a worldwide level, it's a bit of a shame and it's unwelcome that some governments are applying locally what they call environmental taxes or carbon taxes, which in the end are tourist taxes, which aren't more than greenwashing, and removing the space for airlines to invest in what's important, which is exactly biofuels and technical development. I'm talking, for example, on the Portuguese carbon charge, which I'm very publicly critical of. They call it a carbon charge, but it's an X amount paid per passenger. This is not environmentally friendly. Yep. The money does not go back to the industry, and it's not Pigouvian like a tax should be. And it's something, I mean, airlines do not need this kind of approval. They are working and willingly working into being more sustainable. We sell transport to people, and people want to fly green. People want to fly sustainable, and airlines
sorry to
understand
interrupt you, Francisco. But do you think that with these all changes and challenges that we're facing in the aviation industry, do you think there are countries or airlines or the aviation community are tempted to step aside with the environmental with the sustainability and all those things, and focus more on recovering the companies? What is the trade-off between those two?
I don't know if you can. I believe passengers are very much aware. I was doing it, and the millennials are very much aware, and they're the market now, and they will be the majority of the market in 10 years. I did a conference in Switzerland some time ago, and when I opened the floor for questions, first question I had was, is it true Formula One drivers do not pay taxes on their private jets? First question I get from the kids. Yeah. And I'm like, no, aviation has taxes. But I mean, the consumers are very much aware. They do not want to fly airlines if airlines are not paying Social Security properly for the workers. If the airplanes are old and polluting, they want to feel that they're not part of the problem. I think 10 years ago, you would go on a city break to Prague, you wouldn't care. It's a cheap ticket, yep. You buy and you go. Nowadays, people ask those questions. I do not see future for a strict, old school, old-fashioned managerial decision of let's not invest on sustainability, we don't have much cash, let's just fly and sell tickets, because clients, consumers, will ask that and demand that from their airlines.
Okay, I think we are almost done. Just a few final words. In fact, it's challenging times once more. Aviation, since the lockdown, has been facing a lot of, differences and new ideas, to recover, and it's not stopping because we don't know how much time this war between Russia and Ukraine will last, and we hope, of course, that can end soon. But I started the conference saying that the aviation industry has shown remarkable adaptation, but it's going on. Yes, to continue. Thank you for John. First for you, thank you for being with us. Thank you, Francisco, thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
And thank you for the audience to have the patience enough to be with us these 45 minutes. Thank you.